Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope CES going well for you. It's going pretty well for us. I'm Dave Kender. I'm the editor-in-chief of Reviewed. We're part of USA Today.
And I'm Sarah Kovac. I am the accessibility editor for Reviewed. And accessibility is what we're here to talk about today.
That is accessibility. That's exactly what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about accessibility, accessible design, everything that goes into that. We're going to have a great panel discussion in just a few minutes. But first, we'd like to walk through something very special.
We are proud to present a new awards program, the Accessibility Awards. And these awards are given to products that excel in supporting the disabled community. And to kick that off, we have a quick message from another member of our team.
Hi, I'm Christopher Groot. I'm the senior editor for Accessibility at Reviewed. And accessibility has always been something that's been near and dear to my heart. Having lived with a disability my entire life, I've seen firsthand how products designed with accessibility in mind can unlock new abilities for people that may have previously been seen as insurmountable. These awards honor the very best in vision, hearing, dexterity, and aging in place. And I couldn't be more pleased to offer these awards. Have an excellent CES and have a wonderful show.
We are honoring 8 outstanding products today, and all of them can be seen on the CES show floor. So keep an eye out for these while you're wandering around. Our first winner is Rendeavor Fit. Rendeavor Fit is a VR platform designed specifically for the aging community. It uses digital mini games to promote physical and cognitive fitness in seniors.
Our next winner is Biped. Biped, this thing is very cool. It is an AI co-pilot with GPS functionality for people with visual impairment. So it's a harness you wear over your shoulder, and it uses smart driving technology to warn wearers about nearby objects before they appear.
Next, we have Beyonder. Beyonder is a virtual tour platform with live streaming video feeds led by qualified tour guides. So with common software, people who are stuck at home can see the whole world with professionals in real time.
It's Christopher in the photo there. He was a big fan of that. Next up is Samsung Relumino Mode. This is a really fantastic technology for people with visual impairment. And it uses artificial intelligence to dynamically enhance the outlines, color, contrast in pictures in real time. They've been developing it for several years, and it's now rolled out in all 2023 televisions from Samsung.
Next, we have Badger. Badger is a smart wearable display that translates speech to text in real time. So doctors and other professionals who wear ID badges can wear the Badger and better communicate with their clients who have hearing impairments.
Next up is Nest. Nest is a simple but really, really cool product. It's a toothpaste storing and dispensing toothbrush that enables seniors and people with disabilities to easily brush their teeth with one hand at the push of a button.
Lexi's collaboration with Bose has brought us affordable prescription quality hearing aids over the counter. These aids can be adjusted by the user in an app, and they come preloaded with settings to adjust to several different audio environments.
And our final winner of today is Wisear. Wisear's smart earbuds use tiny electrodes to sense specific activities in the brain, in the eyes and facial muscles, and they use signals that you're making, simple signals like blink or a clench of the jaw, to translate those into actions on a mobile device so a user could answer a call, skip a song, perform a whole series of basic functions without even touching their device. And that's it. Those are the winners for the first annual Reviewed Accessibility Awards. Please give a big round of applause for all of the winners here. So all of the brands are somewhere here on the show floor. You'll be able to look them up. A lot of them are here in the audience, and we're actually going to ask 3 of them to come up on stage and join us now to have a discussion about accessibility and accessible design.
Please join us in welcoming to the stage Nick Klopper, Yassine Ashiak, and Kyle Rand.
It's a long walk to the stage. Hi, fellas.
Welcome. I'm going to start with kind of more of a personal question because I feel like accessibility is a very personal category. In my work editing accessibility products, everybody who talks to me about something they've used and loved has a story that relates to why they love that product or some connection to it. So I wanted to know if any of you had any kind of a personal connection to the products that you're selling and making, and if there's any kind of a story behind that. So anybody who wants to jump in.
I don't know if it's a personal story or not, but I think that for us, since day one, the goal has been to try to craft a device that would be usable by the largest possible audience, and people of all accessibility. Reason is that I've been a product manager my whole life, and so my whole life since I left school, I would say, not when I was a baby. And so I've always been like a big fan of trying to understand what's the way to deliver the best experience and the experience that works for everyone. And so I think that's what really carries what we're trying to deliver with Wisear.
Awesome.
Yeah, so at Rendeavor, we are a company that's focused specifically on overcoming social isolation amongst the aging population. And one of the best things about working within aging is that we're all getting older. And for me, it started with my own grandmother. She was, unfortunately, my college career was bookended by losing both of my grandmothers, one very suddenly to a heart condition, and one was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. And that caused us to go through the process of finding her the best quality of care while looking for the best quality of life, which I think is what accessibility really can empower. And seeing firsthand just how difficult it was, it's almost impossible to not want to make something better. But even beyond that, to this day, I'm able to wake up super excited because I know what we're building should impact literally all of us if we all get the chance to age.
That's true. Do you have anything?
Yes. Hello. So for Lexi, it's been a very personal story for me. So typically, age-related hearing loss has a direct link to dementia and late-stage Alzheimer's. And my grandma, all the years, have had hearing loss, and she never wanted to wear her hearing aids due to stigma and other challenges. And now she's 94 years old, and she's got late-stage Alzheimer's. And only once I've started HearX and joined the company, I was able to appreciate the link. And should I've known earlier, they were something we could have actually done. So now the research is showing that the number one modifiable risk factor in early life is actually addressing hearing loss early on, which could potentially reduce your risk of dementia by more than 300%.
And Nick, I have a question specifically for you also. So one of the biggest hurdles to getting hearing aids is the price. And we have these new regulations or lack of regulations with the FDA now that we can sell more hearing aids over the counter. Do you feel like that's going to have an effect on the price of hearing aids, or will they kind of be where they are for a while, do you think?
Your space really blew up in the last few months. There have been a lot of changes in hearing aids.
Yeah, so it's been something we've been, all waiting for a very long time. The first time the bill came about and was sponsored was in 2017. We all anticipated this to come out in 2020. That got delayed due to COVID to 2022. So from August 16 this year, hearing aids are now much more accessible. Now, hearing aids can be bought at your local pharmacy, they can be bought at a big box retailer, but that definitely has had a massive impact on the price of hearing aids. So traditionally, hearing aids have cost in excess of about $4,000 at a specialist or hearing healthcare professional, and now we're seeing that at a quarter or a fraction of a price. Most of the OTC hearing aids currently found on shelves are sub $1,000, and some of them as low as a couple of $100 on the shelves of retailers.
Kyle, can you tell me more about the digital mini games in Rendeavor Fit? There's 3 of them, right?
Yeah, we have Oh, hello. We have 3 right now. We're working on another one that should be really fun that's coming out soon. My favorite one, I wish we had 5 setups so we could do it together, is an app called Cycle. And what we do with Cycle is we strap people in comfortable chairs, right? Thinking accessibility, you need to be able to be comfortable and like safely seated. And then we strap you into an under-desk cycle, and then you are cycling, and then via Bluetooth, the cycle connects to the headset, and then you are actually moving through a virtual environment. And then what our entire Rendever Fit platform is built on is taking physical exercise and kind of upping the ante by including cognitive stimulation and social engagement. So the 5 of us would be cycling. While we're cycling, depending on our difficulty levels and our cognitive abilities, we would be, tasked with a Stroop task where we'd be like popping different colored balloons with our different colored hands. And then we would see each other biking next to each other. So I might see Nick like pass me, which is gonna trigger me to be like, hey, I gotta keep moving. I gotta actually like go a little bit faster, which when you see it actually happen with a group of residents, it is one of the most brilliant, fun, engaging things I've ever seen.
That has to be so rewarding when you see people light up when they're using your product, and like, I made this and I made this for you.
Like, we use the phrase light up all the time, and it feels good. And it also feels good. When I was growing up, my mom was a practicing physical therapist at a nursing home. And so after school, I would go and I would watch her do these like physical exercises with older adults with various issues, and nobody was having a good time. And if you don't have a good time, you're not going to do your PT. Compliance is going to go down, and the impact is going to go down. And so being able to deliver the same kind of like movement and mobility challenges in a way that gets people to light up, it's awesome.
I have a follow-up question to that. So with my experience, I have difficulty with my hands and arms, with dexterity. So I have a VR headset that I can barely use. So it makes me wonder, with Rendever Fit, have you considered different dexterity issues, and are your games adaptable to different ability levels?
Yeah, it's really important. It's actually one of the first things we heard when we started piloting out with senior living communities. We would have cohorts of residents who might not be able to use their arms at all. And we would have cohorts of residents who wouldn't be able to use their lower limbs at all. And so what's great about the setup that we have is you could swap this wouldn't apply to you, but you could swap what you're using with your feet to something that you're using with your arms. You could pedal with your arms, use your upper limb mobility, and ignore the feet, and then vice versa. There are ways to essentially adapt the experience based on what the user needs, and that's like critical when you're designing for an aging population.
Exactly. Yassine, I have kind of a similar question for you. The gestures in Wisear, there's just a handful of gestures, right? Can you tell me what those are and why those were chosen, if there were specific accessibility reasons for those?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think the way we saw this is like, if you look at all the devices that are being created today, whether it is earphones or even video consoles and so on, when these devices are released, they usually always need hands inputs or voice inputs, right? And if you think about it, even for wireless earphones, you have to go and try to find a very small button right here. I think it also applies to hearing aids, where you have to try to tap a button at the back of the ear. So these are great devices and very small devices, but I think most of the time they're not really defined with the whole scope of adaptability in mind. And we see this, for instance, with Microsoft or recently PlayStation having to release after that some adaptive controller for their own consoles. We try to take a reverse approach from that, saying that we would be accessible by design. And so that's why every control that we've been thinking about, we try to think about them being hands-free and voice-free. And so getting back to your question now, what are these controls, right? So what we're developing is a neural interface. So we're basically interpreting the bioelectrical activity that's generated by your brain, your eyes, and your facial muscle. And so we've spent a good 2 years now in R&D, and we still need some R&D. Like what I have on me is a prototype, but we're far away from where you guys are in terms of development. So we'll see in another 2 years. But what we're actually using is the masseter, which is the muscle at the back of the jaw. And so by clenching your jaw twice or thrice, you're actually able to control a device like a clicker, right? And so the one that we've been developing more recently is based on eye tracking, but without a camera, just using these same sensors. We can detect if you're moving your eyes from left to right or right to left, or up and down or blinking. And so the idea for us is really to enable a menu navigation at the moment that would not require any hands or voice commands.
That's amazing. Of all of the products that we were looking through, yours was the one that felt most Jetsons.
And as I think about that, using your face or your, brain or muscles in your face to control something, I'm thinking of, like those moments when you're really frustrated and you're clenching your jaw. I'm wondering, does it happen often that people accidentally do these gestures, or is there a way that you've probably confronted that?
That's the greatest question. For someone that I'm wearing these things like multiple hours a day just to try to test them to their limits. The one key metric that you try to follow, I'll try to answer this in two parts, but the one key metric you want to follow is reducing the number of false positives, so like false activation, to close to zero, right? And the metric that's being used by pretty much everyone that's building an interface today is you need to be below 1 false positive per hour. That's what's being used by Amazon for their Alexa, Google for their assistants. So today, with these controls that I've described, like the jaw clenching specifically, the eyes is still younger, so we have to work on it. But the jaw clenching, we're way below 1 false positive per hour. Now, how do we get there? I think that's the right question. Is you need to make sure that you cover all the cases that could trigger false positive, so chewing a gum, swallowing water, talking for what it's worth. But also you need to make sure that the data you're collecting is coming from the broader possible audience, right? Because if you only train on 6.2 male in their 30s, you're not going to get the diversity of data that you need to have your algorithm really working well on everyone. And so that's what we've been trying to do from the get-go, is try to make sure that the audience we're collecting data from is as diverse as possible in gender, in age, in accessibility. And so we're going to keep pushing that to make sure that whenever we release that product to the market in a couple of years, it can work on anyone without any kind of adaptation need. Sorry, I talked a lot.
all of you you've been working on these products for years. And you're talking with customers, you're talking with marketers, manufacturers. You have to onboard people into your team and sell them on your dream to help make it happen. What do you think is commonly misunderstood about accessible design?
I can jump in. I think for us, we are so focused on the aging population. And there's a lot that is misunderstood still societally about the aging population. And so when we onboard new team members, we do our best to educate them on everything. I think the things that we hear across the board, not just new team members, even when we speak to press, when we talk to prospective partners, there's this really false conception that the older adult is one single entity. Right? There's like this monolith of the older adults. Realistically, between the ages of 55 and 105, you can chop that up into like 1,000 different ways. Right? There's 1,000 different ways that a set of parameters will come together to form. This is the person we're designing for. And a lot of people think designing for older adults is just anyone who's 55 plus. That's not true. And very tightly tied to that is as you go through the aging process, it goes from just one individual who's aging to that individual and their caregiver, that individual and their children and their grandchildren and their financial planner, their nurse, their home care aide, their hospice organization. When you design for an aging population, you need to design for all of the stakeholders, and you need to understand that the stakeholders are going to come in at a variety of time points. I think that it's critical.
Nick, I had a question. Oh, are you going to say something anyway? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one additional piece, which I think was very relevant for us. When we started conceptualizing Lexi in 2018, one of the key components in our user journey is actually the ability to use a smartphone to set up your hearing aids. Now, older population, smartphones, people told us this is not going to happen, right? Traditionally, they go to an audiologist, they help them, one, set up their hearing aids, and two, get them into their ears. So, of course, we plowed through and said, we don't take no for an answer. We're going to see if this is going to work. And now less than 1 out of 100 people going through our onboarding setup actually need telephonic support to, one, install the app, get it onboarded. And I think COVID has actually been a fantastic catalyst. We now see older people that actually were forced to digitally communicate with their kids, et cetera, et cetera.
FaceTime became everybody's meeting place, yeah.
Exactly. And now our oldest customer is 98 years of age. And what has been fascinating to see as well is that the traditional age of hearing aids, or people who get hearing aids through audiologists, is about 72 years. But the average age has now come down with the OTC. So currently our average age is about 59, which I think is fantastic if you think about one, stigma associated with hearing loss, it's for the older people. And secondly, as well as it just means that we're catching people earlier, potentially minimizing the offset of those comorbidities, which can, kind of diminish the elder life.
Maybe to add on to that, and I'm going to talk a bit more on the consumer electronics side of the world, which I know better. I think the misconception for me is that people think that there needs to be two types of product. It needs to be like two separate products. The product for people with all accessibilities and the other product. I think it can be completely embedded into one and designed as such from get-go. And I think we see it now and more, like even with big groups like Apple, like their recent communication, like their ads was amazing because they just showed how they could use their regular products to make it accessible to everyone. And I think that's in your field as well, when you see the merging between hearing aids and wireless earphones. I think New Hera is kind of pioneering this as well. I think it's interesting to see how we can design one product for everyone instead of having to separate different lines of products.
Nick, my question for you was about the collaboration with Lexi and Bose. How did that get started? Because I know Bose was kind of working on their own thing first, and then you guys teamed up. So how did that happen, and what was their involvement in the process? And just tell us more about that.
It's definitely been a fantastic catalyst for a very, I would say, young startup to be able to partner with such a prestigious brand. So it all happened in actually 2019 CES. We met up with the Bose team. They told us about their aspirations to get into the hearing business. At that stage,
CES, it's where dreams come true.
At that stage, they were already busy for a couple of years developing their first iteration of the hearing aids. And we developed at that stage core technologies for the clinician, the doctor, the audiologist. And we then assisted them with licensing certain technologies like hearing assessments for both the app experience and their online experience. They then launched their first product in 2020. 2021, we launched our first product in 2020. And they then went through a restructure with a new CEO to focus more on the consumer electronic business. And when they did that, they said, who's going to be the best partner to license our technology, all the work that we put in? And Lex was an obvious choice for them. Bose is also a shareholder in Eurex and one of our first investors. And that transpired now in July and completely catapulted our business. And it's been absolutely fantastic from a credibility perspective in the consumer's mind to have that audio quality associated with our brand.
I mean, go to the list here. We have like 100 questions that we wanted to ask.
Well, actually, I remember what I was going to ask. Kyle, you mentioned social isolation, and we all kind of got a taste of that in the last few years, and we all know now, it's doing something virtually is not the same as meeting face-to-face. But do you think that the technology is going to get to a place where it will be just as good as meeting face-to-face, or is it a matter of doing the best with what we have?
It's such a good question. I think realistically, there's no one-size-fits-all application for anybody. And what we need to be doing, and I'll focus on social isolation and aging, what we need to be doing is we need to be building out an entire tool belt that we can use to empower someone to live the life that they want to live. And so for older adults, when they reach a certain point in their aging process where their ability to even get out of their house or get out of the senior living community they're living in is more or less shuttered, being able to provide technology that lets them expand those worlds and go and explore and be a part of the greater community, the impact, because you open that door wide open, is just so strong. So for that demographic, I honestly think VR is better than a ton of different options. But that's not true for everybody, and that's why it goes back to ultimately what we need is we need a tool belt where if someone is presenting with a need and a desire to live a certain form of life, we need to be able to give that to them.
And you mentioned using Rendever Fit like in the context of like a home or a living community. So for the ones that are actually really isolated and on their own, is there a way for them to still interact with people, like maybe online? Or yes, tell me about it.
Yes. Our whole company is built on social engagement. So every single product we have at this point, 5 award-winning products within our ecosystem, all focused on the aging population and all focused on helping them to form better relationships through a variety of modalities. And so Rendever Fit, while yes, it's exercise and yes, it's cognitive stimulation, it's built on the same social backbone that like our entire ecosystem is built on. And so of course people can spend time together. They don't need to be across all of our platforms. You don't need to be in the same room sitting next to each other to engage together, because you get to be embodied as avatars. You have voice communication turned on between the headsets, so you can have these authentic experiences. And we're currently working on a clinical trial looking at the use case of people who are living in senior living communities and their family members who are living like 3 states, 5 states, even separate countries away, and seeing how well we can really get them to form connection through these experiences. Results pending.
I have a more general question. Personally, I feel like in the last few years, there was this major sea change in suddenly people talking about accessibility and accessible design in the consumer tech space. And obviously you have been at work in this space for a while, but do you feel like there has been, some corner has been turned in the general consumer tech space where doors are opening?
Yeah, so I can only speak some of the engagements we've had. So we now see this shift in major retailers. One of them I'd like to kind of call out is Best Buy, where we see a major shift in their health-focused one. And secondly, if you think about their aging care they have currently in-home service, so we see a massive shift towards them becoming much more of a healthcare company than just a big box mover. And then channel players, and places like QVC has now got an entire department around accessibility. When I visited them a couple of months ago, they told me that now clothing that is easy to button up for people with dexterity challenges, those things are hot sellers, selling even better than typical products which they used to be selling 2-3 years ago. So definitely a major shift in most of the retail channels we see across the consumer electronics space.
Yeah, we've seen that at Best Buy also, and they do a great job calling it out on their website as well.
I think there's also another key role that's being played by the fact that technological advances are easier to scale. What I'm saying here is that, for instance, the core technology of what we're using has originally been developed by a hearing aids company. It's called ear EEG, so it's like measuring the brain activity of the ear, the brain activity from the ear of the user. And the original angle that was taken was like, how can we help to better understand which sound a specific person is paying attention to? So it's called the cocktail party effect that I think you know.
And that's more of that Jetson stuff. If you're measuring brain activity from the ear, that's amazing. Please continue.
But what's so interesting though is that this technology started to be developed originally for hearing aids, and now if you look at all the VR and AR players, they're actually trying to leverage that same technology to see how they can make the whole VR ecosystem or AR ecosystem more immersive, because they want to know if I'm paying attention to the person that's closest to me or the person that's further away to me. And so I think that the fact that all these great people developing new technologies are trying to scale them everywhere also helps bridge the gap between like the different markets that are trying to be addressed. And so that's what you see as one of the merger between also accessibility and non-accessibility market, I would say.
Yeah, everything these two said, and then I want to go back to a point you made, Sarah, which is one of the biggest silver linings from the past couple years of the pandemic is that as a global society, we have all experienced what happens when the world slams the door shut on you for an indefinite amount of time. And so there's an opportunity to take that and really build empathy for why we need to think about accessibility. And so I think that that's really exciting. I think it's something we get to take forward into the future. And then to go back to calling out a few players, for the aging population, like we have been working with AARP, I'm sure, hopefully everyone knows who AARP is, for ever since 2017. Just last year, or in 2021, they launched the Age Tech Collaborative, which was another example of a really big player with a big megaphone coming in and saying, hey, we need to assemble a great community of people who are here to make the world better for this population. And I think that's the power of really big, large companies, being able to do things like that, bringing the right people into the fold to motivate like a societal shift. I want to see more of that.
Speaking of shifts, we almost all of us are interacting hands-free with our technology in some way, or maybe it's just because I'm in the place that I am, surrounded by tech people, but I don't know many people who don't at least ask Siri a question or Google or Alexa. So
This is a safe space for,
Okay.
for this sort of. Yeah.
I'm with my people, you understand. So my question, Yassine, was where was the moment that you thought this could be done better, or was there some moment of inspiration that made you think we could interact with our devices more seamlessly than we already are?
Yeah. Okay. I think the key thing for us and where we see the world going is that the devices we wear or the devices we use are getting more and more wearable, right? If you think 20 years ago, it was like a laptop, a keyboard, and a mouse. Then we moved to like smartphones and touchscreen. Today we have like smartwatches and like earphones, and I think, and we're at CES, right? So I can say it. I think 5, 10 years, no one really knows when, but we're going to all be wearing AR glasses. Maybe that meeting will not even be in person. I mean, we'll all be somewhere. But anyway, so if you look at that evolution, you realize that being hands-free and being mobile is key to be able to control these devices. What we realize is that voice was one answer to this fact of being hands-free. But if tomorrow I'm wearing my AR glasses on me all day long, I don't want voice to be the main control I'm going to have over these glasses because I want to keep some privacy, right? I don't want everyone to know what I'm going to put in my grocery shopping list, or I don't want everyone to know that I'm writing to my girlfriend or whatever. And so we realized that there was a need for something that would be much more like internal, private, as a way to control your devices. And that was kind of the starting point of the company. And so the question was like, what can we bring that's going to be completely hands-free because this device will be wearable and mobile, but that will also respect the privacy of the user so that they don't have to disclose to everyone what they want to do. And that was the starting point of, I would say, what we wanted to build as a human-computer interface.
And can you walk me through some of the gestures and what they can do on phones, like what the features are that you can control with your face?
Sure. So, I mean, and again, please keep in mind that these are just examples of what you could do, because in the end, what we want is we want this to be customizable based on everyone's needs. So, for some people, maybe double clenching the jaw will be playing or pausing the music, but for some others, it will be muting themselves, or for some others, it will be like taking a picture. So it really depends on what you want these actions to do, and we want this to be very customizable to whatever you want to do with the device you're wearing. So right now we have 3 gestures based on jaw activity: a single jaw clenching, a double jaw clenching, and triple jaw clenching. I'm using these mostly to control music. I know my colleague is using these mostly to control his like Zoom environment because he's on call all day long. But again, please keep in mind you can adapt it to whatever you want. And the new ones we've been releasing earlier, like at CES actually, and still very demo, so eyes activity. So we're able to detect if you're moving your eyes to the right, to the left, 2 times to the right, 2 times to the left, and also doing what we call the wiper, which is like left to right or right to left. So we're refining all of these user experience. We're refining the learning of this to make sure it fits in less than 1 minute. But these are the things that we can do today just using these things, you know.
One of the things that we run into in the disabled community very often is that there are these things out there that would help us live our lives better, but we can't afford them. And technology is expensive, and development is expensive. So, I mean, just a general question for anybody who wants to attack that: how do you balance, you know, making the technology what it needs to be and the best it can be in the best way, but also making it affordable to the people who need it the most?
Yeah, maybe Nick, if you want to kick that
You want to
off.
start that, Nick?
Yeah, sure. I think for us, most really different than my 2 fellow panelists, there's already a benchmark of what hearing aids cost, right? So they're
And quite a high benchmark. What is the average cost for a?
So it's about $4,500 currently. That's for a pair, right? For 2. So I think you know, OTC, and there's a couple of things, right? We need to look at the technology layer and say, you know, is the tech, the chips, the microphones, the speakers more expensive or cheaper? I don't think necessarily the hardware component is where the cost saving comes in with OTC. Now, of course, there are, you know, potentially mass scale production, et cetera, just due to volume. But I think the main value comes in the innovative way of the service delivery model, which has changed. So traditionally, you had to go to a medical professional, which of course has got overheads and brick and mortar stores, et cetera, which adds a very big layer to the cost component of hearing aids. We don't see that OTC necessarily or at all eliminates the role of the audiologist. We just feel it changes the way in which audiologists were to engage with their patients. We're an employer of a large group of audiologists, but the difference is they sit in our contact center, which we call our hearing hub, and remotely assist our customers through a mobile phone. And by employing all these subtle changes in the service delivery model, we've managed to keep costs down versus just focusing on the hardware component, of course, which makes up a big piece of that. And of course, by doing so, we've managed to kind of cut the cost by more than 80% of traditional hearing aids.
I think, correct me if you disagree, I think if you are an accessibility first company, like going back to the original question, there's a very high likelihood that you're an impact first company. And people who found their companies on that premise, I think you ultimately are always asking yourselves, how do we spread the impact greater? And one of those big variables that you get to pull is what is the cost. For us, we work in the VR space, and while we don't create any of the hardware, we're a full platform company minus hardware. Don't want to be a hardware company. And so we're very much at the wherewithal of these hardware providers as to how low we can cut our price. So one of the things that I'm actually really proud about what our company did during the pandemic is we launched something called Rendever Live, which originally was to help staff members at senior living communities by kind of taking over and helping to lead VR sessions for them using our internal expertise because staff burden was super high in the caregiving environment. And then what that translated to is only for our VR users. What that translated to is, why don't we turn this on for everybody and remove the need for VR devices and allow anybody who has, a website or who has the internet and who has a computer to go in and log into Rendever Live on a website and join in on the community. And I think if we're constantly thinking about how do we increase spread, innovations like that will naturally come to place, and it's our role to really focus there.
Can you explain also what your customer base looks like? You're selling it as packages, right, for groups?
Yes. So primarily, up until yesterday, we have been focused on the B2B space, which is also...
You had some big news yesterday.
We did have some big news yesterday. So in the B2B space, pricing is different from the B2C space, right? We know this. So up until yesterday, our entire business model was focused on selling group VR systems to senior living communities, to hospice organizations, to healthcare organizations. And then they delivered all of their devices and sessions and experiences to their members. Yesterday, we just announced the acquisition of a virtual reality app called Alcove from our friends over at AARP, which is a big step for us in going towards the consumer market and going towards, in the aging industry, the largest demographic is aging in place. And so going towards that demographic, going towards the caregivers at home, and providing an opportunity for them to get in on some of the magic that we create at Rendever for a much lower price point. They have to have their own VR headset to download Alcove, but Alcove's totally free. And so similarly, if we're always asking ourselves, how do we do more? How do we impact more people? Opportunities are going to present themselves that if we're ready for them, we should be able to just jump on.
Congratulations on that acquisition, because we love the platform, and that's a really big step. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Maybe to keep adding on that, I think being accessible by design is not just about how you design your product, it's also how you price it, right? And so I think there is today this kind of mindset where if you build a product for people with disabilities, you want this to be FDA approved, and because the process of doing that is costly, then it means that your device is costlier afterwards, and then there is this whole game of insurance and so on. If you take a reverse approach and you say, okay, I want my product to be just a regular product that's going to be sold along with AirPods, along with Bose earphones and so on, then basically the constraints you put on yourself on the price points are already much more stringent. And so in our case, for instance, it materializes by the fact that from the get-go, we've been looking for the cheapest components. We've been looking to trying to find components that allow us to keep the hardware below a certain price point, which is very different from most of the neurotechnological devices that are meant for FDA approval, where usually they're not going to be trying to cost control these kind of things. And so I think, the accessibility by design is not just about designing your products, it's also about thinking about all the choices that you make along the way to make this really accessible to everyone.
I'd love to hear from each of you about how the disabled community was involved with the development of your product.
So for us, we started developing and delivering to local senior living communities right away. Obviously, user experience, good UX design means that you're getting constant feedback from your end users. And so as soon as we had a product that worked, we went right to a community. And that helped us a ton in the beginning because the way we designed Rendeavor for our senior living communities, we don't actually require the end users to interact in VR. They just have to adopt and say, yes, I will put on the VR headset. And then the caregivers, the staff at the community, volunteers, they control the entire experience and they deliver the experience. And then the users really focus on what matters to us, which is the social engagement. And so staff members are kind of trained to build this conversation. We wouldn't have necessarily gone so hard in that direction if we hadn't been in person in the beginning, seeing just how hard it was to like fumble around with these controllers. So as we all know, it is just so critical from the get-go to spend time with users.
Can I add a second question in there so when you can answer both of these? Was there a moment in the testing with your first user groups where you said, oh, they get it, this is amazing, this is going to work?
This might be surprising, but for us, it was when we were doing a pilot with a community group called Maplewood Senior Living. They were the first ones to roll out Rendeavor across all their communities, and it had nothing to do with people wearing VR. What happened was, after their VR session, a group of residents stood up, walked together to the lunchroom, sat down, and continued talking. That was the aha moment. That was when they're like, this is what it's all about.
I mean, you want to go? Sorry. No, I think I cannot. I'm 100% aligned, like involving the users from the get-go. On our end, we were recently at one of the biggest accessibility fair in France, where we basically were just wandering around with like our prototype, having people trying them out and confirming that it works on everyone with the same level of performance that we have on like our other users. It's also a matter of, as I was saying, about data collection. Making sure that the data you bring in for your algorithms are like as diverse as possible. And I had one more point, but I completely forgot about it, so I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, so we've been very privileged because Lexi is owned by our parent company called Hearings Group, and by the time we developed Lexi, we've already done 1.5 million hearing assessments. And hearing assessments is a very big piece in actually setting up your hearing aids. So one thing we have learned in the 4 years preceding the build of Lexi was the ability to take a hearing assessment on a smartphone. And I think that was a key piece for us to say, would the elderly population be comfortable in doing a hearing assessment? And we've learned so much about the typical ways and how they engage with it, and there's certain things about you need to be in a quiet environment, using the microphone of the phone to actually make sure that the person's in a quiet environment, right? So it's a lot of things we've learned by the time we did that. And I think what is most probably good for the space was the FDA putting in very stringent guidelines around 510Ks and the acquisition thereof. And there's currently only 5 companies in the world that actually has a self-fit 510K for their hearing aids. And of course, Lexi and Lexi blah, blah, blah are one of them. And what we have had to do during that process is follow a very, very stringent clinical validation, actually proving that we can actually take someone through that setup and actually get them to complete an accurate hearing assessment, which is comparable to a hearing assessment being done on an audiologist. But the aha moment for us was when we compared how long it takes once you've gone to an audiologist and did a hearing assessment, walked out with your hearing aids versus doing it on an app. The difference is an hour to an hour and a half with an audiologist versus the hearing assessment takes about 3 minutes on our technology, and the typical set about 7 minutes. So 10 to, I would say, 12 minutes if you're take your time. You've got a hearing aid set up to doing that at a specialist.
You're also saving the driving time, and for a lot of people, you're probably saving the caregiver time too, right?
I think we're going to have to move on to our final question. Do you have?
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. I didn't have one specifically lined up. Is there something
I got
that you
a
liked?
bunch
Okay.
here. What is the one, real general one? I feel like I get asked this question at the end of every show. What is the technology that's out there that you are most excited about that you think is going to be impactful to either your specific products or the area that you work in, or just accessible design in general? I mean, there's some really big things out there like AI, and there could be more specific things that you're super excited about. Maybe it's here on the show floor, maybe it's not. It'd be helpful if it's here so that everyone can go see it as soon as we're done.
And we can't say our own products, right?
We will assume all of your products are the 3 most important things that people have to see.
So one of the things that most excites me as we plan for the future has been the rise of 5G, but I think more accurately is the rise of like the Starlink satellite system. Anybody who is going to find a way to increase broadband accessibility to populations that are not city dwelling, that are in more remote areas, that don't have access to a lot of city amenities, is going to pave the way for us to be able to bring technologies like ours is definitely Wi-Fi dependent, to a broader population. So I'm really excited by that, and I think that we need to be shredding forward very quickly in that direction.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for hearing aids, battery consumption is a major challenge, right? I mean, we currently, our B2 hearing aid is a rechargeable device. It currently lasts 18 hours, about a 3-hour charge to get you for an 18-hour. But once you add starting streaming and a couple of other things to these hearing aids, battery drain is a very big challenge in hearing aids. Now, there's two ways to solve it, right? Increase the battery size, but then of course the size of the hearing aid increases, which no one wants. So there's a lot of advances currently in Bluetooth Low Energy, which has been a massive catalyst for the hearing aid space, that you can go smaller with your hearing aids. Now we have hearing aids which are going into the ear, much more invisible, counteracting that stigma. And that's mostly the most recent largest catalyst. And there's actually a lot of pipeline in that space that'll potentially have that drain on that battery usage. For us, that definitely would change the way in which hearing aids operate in the future.
I mean, my answer will be a bit tied to what we do, but I think augmented reality is really the thing I'm the most excited about. It's like I think I'm really tired of having to look down on my smartphone every time I want to get some information. I would really like to have something straight on my eyes. I think that would really help. I also think that like having all this information that's encompassed somewhere in the metaverse, the internet, the way you want, and that could be automatically added to your eyesight as a way to make your life simpler and easier. I think it's really something that excites me a lot, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, thank you all so much, Nick, Yassine, Kyle, Sarah. Thank you for inventing really great things and then for coming up here to talk about them. You can learn more about these products and all the other products that Sarah and I talked about. Just follow that QR code over there. We wrote about them on Reviewed. Thanks. Have a great show.